Today, we're diving into the minds of people who grew up in the decade where Saturday morning cartoons were appointment television, your phone was attached to a wall with a cord, and the most dangerous thing you did all day was exist outside without a helmet, supervision, or sunscreen. That's right, we're talking about the psychology of 80s kids. The generation that played until the streetlights came on, survived on sugary cereal that would be classified as a controlled substance today, and developed the kind of mental toughness you can only get from waiting 3 months to see if your crush circled yes or no on a folded piece of notebook paper. Let's start with the big one. 80s kids occupy this fascinating psychological space as the last analog generation and the first digital one. You learned cursive, but you also learned to type on a keyboard. You passed notes in class, then later sent emails. You're basically bilingual, except instead of Spanish and English, it's outside until the streetlights come on and Netflix binge. This created what psychologists call cognitive flexibility. Your brain had to adapt to massive technological shifts during your formative years. One day you're blowing into a Nintendo cartridge like it's CPR for electronics. The next day you're figuring out dial-up internet. This constant adaptation, it actually made 80s kids exceptionally good at learning new systems and pivoting when things change. But here's the catch. It also created a unique form of nostalgia that borders on religious devotion. You don't just remember the 80s, you feel them. The psychology here is called reminiscence bump, and for 80s kids, it's less of a bump and more of a Mount Everest of memories. Now let's talk about something that sounds like bad parenting, but was just parenting. The 80s was the last era of genuine childhood independence. Your parents literally kicked you out of the house in the morning and expected you back when it got dark. No cell phones, no GPS tracking, no Find My Friends app. Just vibes and survival instincts. This created what developmental psychologists call environmental mastery. You learned to navigate the world without a safety net, which sounds terrifying, but actually built incredible problem-solving skills. Got into a fight? Figure it out. Lost your bike? Better retrace your steps. Bored? Use your imagination because there are exactly 4 TV channels and none of them are playing what you want. The psychological impact? 80s kids tend to have higher resilience and self-reliance. You learned that minor failures weren't catastrophic. They were just Tuesday. This created a psychological buffer against anxiety that many later generations struggle to develop. But it also means you're slightly confused by helicopter parenting. You see a kid with a tracking device and think, what's next? A mission briefing before going to the park. Here's where it gets really interesting. Growing up in the 80s meant you were a master of delayed gratification and you didn't even know it. Want to watch your favorite show? Better be home at exactly 7:30 p.m. on Thursday. Miss it? Too bad. It's gone. No streaming, no recording, just pure existential dread. Want to hear your favorite song? You had to wait by the radio with your finger on the record button, hoping the DJ wouldn't talk over the intro. Want to call your crush? You had to risk their dad answering the phone. The psychological fortitude required for that alone deserves a medal. Walter Mischel's famous marshmallow test has nothing on waiting 6 weeks to see if your photos from summer vacation turned out okay. That's elite-level impulse control training. This created neural pathways for patience that modern instant gratification culture struggles to replicate. The downside? You get irrationally angry when a web page takes more than 3 seconds to load. I used to wait 3 days for a mail-order catalog, and you can't buffer a video? Moving on to social development. In the 80s, if you wanted to see your friends, you had to physically go to their house. No texting you home, you just showed up and knocked. If they weren't there, you wasted an entire bike ride. This was the cost of friendship. This face-to-face interaction during critical developmental years created strong interpersonal skills. You learned to read body language, facial expressions, and social cues because that's all you had. No emojis to clarify tone, no JK to soften a joke. Just raw, unfiltered social interaction. The psychological literature calls this social cognition development, and 80s kids got a masterclass. You can have an entire conversation with just eye contact and eyebrow movements. It's like a superpower. But here's the thing. You also developed a tolerance for boredom that's practically superhuman. Long car ride? You looked out the window and created elaborate fantasy worlds in your head. Waiting room? You read a magazine from 1972. Your imagination wasn't just encouraged, it was mandatory for survival. Now, the media you consumed shaped your psychology in wild ways. Saturday morning cartoons weren't just entertainment, they were a cultural event. You got up at 6 a.m. voluntarily, as a child. The psychology behind this is fascinating. Limited access to entertainment made it more valuable. Scarcity increased enjoyment. Modern streaming has abundance, which paradoxically makes people less satisfied. It's the paradox of choice on steroids. Plus, 80s media had a very specific vibe. Everyone was trying to sell you something during commercial breaks, but you developed advertising literacy without realizing it. You knew it was manipulation, but you still wanted that skip it so bad you'd do extra chores. Here's something deeper. Growing up in the Cold War created a unique psychological backdrop. You had nuclear drills at school. You watched movies where computers nearly started World War III by accident. The threat of global annihilation was just background noise. This created what psychologists call ambient anxiety, but paradoxically, it also created a live-in-the-moment mentality. You couldn't doom scroll because scrolling didn't exist. You couldn't catastrophize about the future on social media. You just lived. And weirdly, this might have been healthier. The constant low-level awareness of mortality made 80s kids appreciate the present without obsessing over it. So what's the psychological profile of someone who grew up in the 1980s? You're adaptable, resilient, patient, socially skilled, and you have an imagination that could power a small city. You can troubleshoot technology, and you can change a tire. You can have fun with literally nothing, and you can appreciate everything. But you also get unreasonably emotional about theme songs from 35 years ago, and you'll defend your childhood cartoons like they're family members. If you grew up in the 80s, drop a comment with your most nostalgic memory, and if you didn't, go ask someone who did about their adventures outside with zero supervision. The stories are worth it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and remember, the 80s didn't just shape a generation. It created psychological warriors armed with emotional resilience and encyclopedic knowledge of cartoon theme songs.